Imagine a movie star, one of the most beautiful women in the world, who secretly co-invented the technology that now powers your Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. Hedy Lamarr's brilliant work was dismissed because of her fame, but her silent legacy now connects the entire world. Keep listening to find out how her invention worked and why her genius was overlooked for decades. Hey friends, dim the lights and let the hum of your thoughts settle into a gentle quiet. Now picture this: velvet gowns rustling across marble floors, candlelight flickering against brass instruments, and in the midst of it all, a woman scribbling algorithms no one yet understands. Ada Lovelace, born in 1815, daughter of the poet Lord Byron, would one day write the first ever computer program before computers even existed. Her partner, Charles Babbage, inventor of the analytical engine. But it was Ada who saw beyond math. She imagined machines that could compose music, create art, and even think, decades before the word computer meant anything more than a job title. She called it poetical science, blending the strict logic of mathematics with boundless creativity. And the funny thing is, most of her work sat forgotten in dusty archives while men received the applause. Only long after Ada's death did the world realize she'd written the blueprint for modern code. The rhythm of her logic now pulses inside every phone, every satellite, every digital whisper. You can almost hear her fingers tapping keys that hadn't yet been invented. Isn't that a haunting kind of foresight? Close your eyes, dear listener, and imagine dreaming a century ahead of your time. You're now stepping into the gentle trade winds of early 1900s Hawaii, where mango trees sway and glass vials glisten under the morning sun. There, in a quiet lab at the University of Hawaii, a young woman named Alice Augusta Ball mixed, boiled, and experimented with hope. She was only in her early 20s, black, female, and brilliant. And what she did changed the course of medical history. Leprosy, once a life sentence, had no real cure. But Alice devised a method to make chalmugra oil, an old herbal remedy, actually absorb into the body. Her Ball method worked when nothing else did. She never got to see its worldwide impact. At just 24, she died mysteriously, perhaps due to lab exposure. And others tried to take credit, but her notes and students told the truth. Even in silence, her legacy endured. Hospitals from India to the Philippines adopted her formula. Thousands were healed, and decades later, her name was rightfully restored, etched into science halls and medical journals. You might not have heard of Alice Ball before tonight, but you've just stepped into her soft revolution. Isn't it beautiful how quiet discovery can ripple across the world? Dear listener, take a deep breath. Now imagine the rustling fields of colonial Pennsylvania in the early 1700s. Wind tugging at corn leaves, hooves pressing soft mud. In a tiny wooden workshop, Sibylla Masters was tinkering. She had an idea. What if you could crush corn into fine meal more efficiently and without wasting the husk? Her invention would later revolutionize how corn was processed. But Sibylla couldn't patent it, not in her name. You see, in 1715, English law denied women ownership over their own creations. So the patent went to her husband, Thomas, even though every bolt, blade, and blueprint had sprung from her mind. Still, Sibylla didn't stop. She later created medical devices and textiles using indigenous techniques she'd studied. Her home buzzed like a little think tank. Though her name nearly vanished in the folds of colonial records, she left her mark in how American grain was milled and in the quiet defiance of building while invisible. Tonight, as you rest, think of Sibylla's hands covered in flour and ink, crafting machines in candlelight. Isn't it soothing to remember that ideas, like seeds, don't always sprout immediately, but they do take root? You are now standing in a hospital hallway in Baltimore, 1951. White walls, flickering lights, and a story no one thought to tell for decades. Henrietta Lacks had no scientific training, no laboratory background. She was a tobacco farmer, a mother of 5, with a radiant laugh and a stubborn kind of strength. But inside her body grew something extraordinary, cells that would never die. Doctors took a sample of her tumor without asking. From that, they grew the first immortal cell line, HeLa cells. They became the foundation for countless medical breakthroughs, polio vaccines, cancer treatments, even space medicine. Yet for years, no one told Henrietta's family. Her name wasn't on the papers, the patents, the prestige. She healed the world, anonymously. Only later did her story emerge, through books, testimonies, and the determination of her children. Now, laboratories around the world owe part of their origin to a woman who never got to speak for herself. As you drift off tonight, let her memory wrap around you like a soft quilt stitched with quiet justice. Because even in silence, Henrietta's cells are still growing. Hey friends, if you're enjoying these calm stories from history's forgotten corners, don't forget to subscribe. It helps more curious minds find their way here. Now, close your eyes and picture the rhythmic creak of timber, the scent of sawdust thick in the air. In early 1800s Massachusetts, sawmills were noisy and brutal, men pushing two-handled saws back and forth, wasting half their effort on the return stroke. But Tabitha Babbitt, a Shaker woman, watched quietly and thought, what if the saw turned on its own? She invented the circular saw, a round blade that rotated continuously, simple, elegant, and far more efficient. Because she belonged to the Shaker community, which believed in collective ownership, she never patented it. Her design was shared freely, but her legacy still spins in every modern sawmill, every workshop across the world. Tabitha didn't need fame. She found joy in improvement, in practicality, in movement made graceful. So tonight, when the world feels full of noise, remember Tabitha's quiet idea that sometimes the most powerful change goes in circles. You're drifting now to a quiet laboratory in Pennsylvania, 1905. Outside, cicadas hum under golden leaves. Inside, a woman peers through a microscope. Nettie Stevens was one of the first scientists to discover that biological sex is determined by chromosomes, specifically that males carry both X and Y while females have 2 X's. Before her, theories swirled: heat, nutrition, even moral behavior. But Nettie's slides showed a consistent pattern. Her discovery was clear, elegant, undeniable, and yet, history credited her male peers. Her findings were cited under their names. Her contributions softened like pencil marks smudged by time. Still, she kept working. Tiny fruit flies, sliced and stained for study, whispered secrets to her. Nettie never married, never stopped experimenting. She left behind over 30 scientific papers. Her final one arrived just as she passed away at 50. Tonight, imagine the slide glass shimmering under lamplight, a tiny X and Y crossing paths like celestial bodies. Isn't it something? How truth can live inside a cell and be found by someone determined to see? Hey friends, let your thoughts float gently to a snowy field in Austria, 1938. A physicist in exile, Lise Meitner, had fled the Nazis for Sweden. From a small cabin, she scribbled furiously on a napkin. Across the sea, her old colleague Otto Hahn had just split the atom, but couldn't explain it. Lise could. She theorized that splitting uranium released immense energy. Her insight became the key to understanding nuclear fission. Yet when Hahn received the Nobel Prize, her name was left out. Lise never worked on the atomic bomb. She believed in light, not destruction. Her heart ached over what her discovery became. Even so, she kept teaching, kept writing, honored by later generations as the mother of the atom. Picture her in her winter coat, breath fogging the air, eyes fixed on the invisible universe beneath matter. Sometimes the greatest force lies not in the explosion, but in the quiet that comes before. Hey friends, take a moment to stretch your toes and settle into the warmth of your blanket. Now imagine walking into a bathroom in 1950s America. What you see, sanitary pads, holders, dispensers, owe much to one woman, Mary Beatrice Davidson Kenner. Mary filed 5 patents in her lifetime. She improved bathroom tissue holders, invented adjustable sanitary belts before adhesive pads existed, and even designed a waterproof wheelchair tray. Her ideas were brilliant, but she was black, and companies refused to license her inventions once they discovered her race. Still, she kept inventing. Mary once said that her mind buzzed with ideas like popcorn in a kettle. She never stopped sketching, tinkering, testing. Her devices made life easier, cleaner, more dignified, especially for women. As you drift off tonight, think about how many moments of comfort came from inventions few people recognize. And maybe, how many more ideas sleep inside minds waiting to be heard. You are now aboard a naval ship in the mid-20th century. The hum of machines surrounds you. Lights blink. Keyboards click like waves. Here, Rear Admiral Grace Hopper, yes, Admiral, was rewriting the rules of code. She helped create COBOL, one of the earliest programming languages, and introduced the idea of machine-independent software. She also coined the term debugging when she removed a moth from a computer relay. Grace didn't just write code. She translated thought into logic, making programming accessible. Her work laid the foundation for how modern languages run your phones, your emails, even the satellites overhead. Despite being a woman in a male-dominated military world, she rose through the ranks. Her lectures became legend. Her mind moved faster than the computers she built. Imagine that. A soft-spoken woman with giant ideas, outpacing the future with a slide rule and a sly smile. Isn't it lovely how sometimes revolution wears navy blue? Hey friends, let's end tonight's journey in a paper mill in 19th century Massachusetts. Machinery clanks, steam curls upward, and a young girl watches with eagle eyes. Margaret Knight loved puzzles. At 12, she invented a safety device for cotton mills. But her greatest creation? A machine that folded flat-bottomed paper bags. It doesn't sound thrilling until you realize every grocery store, every lunch packed in brown paper owes itself to her invention. When a man tried to steal her patent, saying no woman could design such a machine, she took him to court and won. She would go on to hold nearly 30 patents. Imagine her beside a cluttered workbench, gears scattered like breadcrumbs. Her mind was a blueprint for things we now call ordinary. But isn't that the magic? When a quiet invention becomes an invisible part of daily life. Close your eyes. Maybe tomorrow you'll open a paper bag and remember Margaret's quiet genius. You are now seated beside a bubbling brook in 19th century Massachusetts. The water's clear, the breeze cool, and a woman in a wide-brimmed hat is collecting samples, bottles clinking softly in her satchel. Ellen Swallow Richards was the first woman admitted to MIT, and the first to teach there. She pioneered environmental chemistry, studying water purity when few people considered pollution measurable. She tested wells, sewage systems, and even food. Her discoveries shaped laws for public sanitation. But Ellen's quiet revolution extended indoors too. She founded the field of home economics, not to promote chores, but to treat the household as a site of science. To her, kitchens deserved the same logic as laboratories. Cleanliness, nutrition, ventilation, every detail mattered. She wanted science not in ivory towers, but in laundries and pantries where life unfolded daily. Imagine her peering at a drop of river water under a microscope, seeing bacteria where others saw nothing. Isn't it peaceful to know that sometimes the most transformative discoveries happen in your own backyard? Dear listener, let the road beneath your thoughts stretch quietly into the past. Along cobblestone paths winding through German villages in 1888, Bertha Benz had an idea. Or rather, she had her husband's invention, a motorized carriage that no one trusted. So one morning, without asking permission, she took it and her sons and drove 66 miles across the countryside. She refueled at pharmacies, unclogged fuel lines with hairpins, and invented brake pads using leather from a shoemaker. That journey became the first long-distance car trip in history. And without Bertha's bold detour, the automobile might have gathered dust in a garage. Carl Benz got the patent, the fame, and the factories, but Bertha proved it could work. Every engine hum on a midnight drive? That's Bertha's whisper echoing through time. Close your eyes now and picture her hands on the tiller, the wind combing through her bonnet. Sometimes to change the world, you simply have to go for a drive. Hey friends, dim the lights and picture yourself in a quiet basement lab in post-war London. A single photograph lies on a table, black and white, cross-hatched like the spiral of a shell. Rosalind Franklin took that photograph. It revealed the structure of DNA, its elegant, twisting ladder. Her work in X-ray crystallography helped decode the very blueprint of life. But when James Watson and Francis Crick raced to model the double helix, they used her data without asking. They won the Nobel. Rosalind, by then passed away from cancer, was barely mentioned. Yet her work endures in every biology textbook, in every cell, in every breath you take. DNA replication, genetic medicine, ancestry testing, they all begin with that ghostly X-ray image. She was meticulous, intense, deeply private, but the clarity of her vision changed biology forever. As you drift tonight, imagine her alone with her microscope, capturing the shape of life itself on film. Isn't it extraordinary how even a single image can hold the spiral of everything? You are now standing beneath a redwood canopy, the air thick with moss and possibility. A woman in hiking boots strides past, binoculars bouncing against her chest. Meet Ines Mexia, a Mexican-American botanist who began her scientific career at 55. She traveled through Alaska, South America, and the Andes, collecting over 145,000 plant specimens. Many had never been cataloged. 50 bear her name. She was fearless, determined, and deeply curious. She'd camp alone in jungles, cross rivers on rafts, and hike up volcanoes, all to gather fragile petals and leaves that would shape botanical science. Though universities rejected her, museums welcomed her collections. Her plants sit in the Smithsonian, Harvard, and Kew Gardens. She never published flashy papers. Instead, she let the flowers speak. Tonight, listen for the rustle of her field journal, the press of a blossom between paper. Isn't it comforting to know that sometimes the wildest dreams bloom late? Hey friends, take a deep breath and imagine the ancient streets of Alexandria, sandal prints in dust, scrolls unfurled like sails. There, beneath stone columns and drifting incense, taught Hypatia, a philosopher, mathematician, and astronomer, born in the 4th century when most women were denied books, let alone knowledge. She revised Ptolemy's astronomical tables. She taught Neoplatonism, blending math, ethics, and the cosmos. Her students included pagans and Christians alike. Her brilliance made her respected and feared. Eventually, politics turned violent, and Hypatia was killed by a mob. But her teachings had already spread. Much of her work was lost, but echoes of her thought remain in surviving texts, quoted by those who loved her intellect. Imagine her tracing geometric forms in sand, then glancing up at the stars for validation. Isn't it poetic that even in ruins knowledge leaves behind a glow? Dear listener, let's step into a hotel room in 1920s New York. Velvet curtains, tinkling jazz, and a woman surrounded by sketch pads and springs. Beulah Louise Henry was known as Lady Edison. Over her life, she patented over 50 inventions, from ice cream machines to typewriters with interchangeable ribbons. She didn't need a formal engineering degree. Her ideas came like fireflies, quick, bright, and endless. She once said she saw machines in her dreams and woke up to draw them. She created sewing machine attachments, hair curlers, umbrella improvements. Most were everyday fixes, but that's what made her remarkable. She believed in making life smoother, one small tool at a time. Close your eyes and imagine her adjusting gears, tweaking hinges, humming as ideas bloomed in the soft glow of lamplight. Isn't it lovely how some people fix the world by noticing what sticks, what clatters, what's slightly off? Hey friends, drift back to 1960s America. Fluorescent lights buzz softly in a NASA office. There, behind a desk, sits Annie Easley, math whiz, computer programmer, and rocket scientist. She helped develop code that powered the Centaur rocket stage, used in missions to the Moon, Mars, and beyond. She was one of the first black women at NASA. Faced with discrimination, she refused to dim her brilliance. Annie believed computers were tools for equity. She taught kids, advocated for women in STEM, and helped others navigate the federal system. While astronauts got ticker tape parades, Annie's code guided them silently from behind the curtain. Picture her fingers flying over a keyboard, calculations stacked like poetry. Sometimes the truest stars aren't in the sky, but in the rooms where paths to them are written. You're now in 17th century Amsterdam. The air smells of parchment, ink, and something more delicate, mangoes, orchids. Maria Sibylla Merian was a naturalist and artist who traveled to Suriname in her 50s, alone, in an age when women barely left home without escort. There, she painted butterflies in all their stages: egg, larva, chrysalis, and winged miracle. She was among the first to study metamorphosis directly, disproving the belief that insects came from mud. Her drawings weren't just beautiful, they were scientific. Her books combined art and biology in a way no one had before. She saw insects not as pests, but as performers in nature's grand theater. Tonight, imagine a caterpillar crawling across her paintbrush as she sketches. Isn't there something meditative about observing transformation up close? Somewhere between pigment and patience, Maria painted the process of becoming. Dear listener, dim the lights and enter the ballroom of a 1920s mansion in Boston. Chandeliers sparkle. But Catherine McCormick's mind is elsewhere. She's planning a revolution. After her husband died, she inherited a vast fortune. And instead of spending it on gowns or yachts, she funneled it into science, specifically birth control research. She funded the development of the first oral contraceptive, the birth control pill, when no one else would. Her quiet financial backing helped biologists overcome every scientific and political obstacle. Thanks to Catherine, millions gained agency over their bodies and futures. She rarely asked for recognition. She just wanted the work to continue. Close your eyes and picture her sliding a check across a lab table, with the weight of generations behind it. Isn't it powerful how some revolutions are bankrolled in silence? Hey friends, if you're enjoying this journey through quiet brilliance, don't forget to subscribe. There's so much more ahead. Now settle into the soft warmth of a kitchen in 1930s Massachusetts. Flour dust hangs in the air. A woman drops bits of chocolate into dough, expecting them to melt. They didn't. The result? The first chocolate chip cookie. Ruth Wakefield ran the Toll House Inn. She was a dietitian, an innovator, and a flavor alchemist. She refined the balance of sugar, fat, and texture. Her recipe became a sensation. Nestlé even struck a deal with her, printing her recipe on packages. In exchange, she got a lifetime supply of chocolate. Ruth didn't just invent a dessert. She invented a feeling, warmth, comfort, nostalgia, all baked into a golden round. So tonight, as dreams drift in like the smell of sugar on the air, remember Ruth's gentle genius. Isn't it sweet how sometimes the most lasting legacies are shared in batches? Hey friends, dim the lights and look up. Imagine the deep indigo of space shimmering beyond your window. Mae Jemison wasn't just the first black woman in space. She was a physician, a dancer, a Peace Corps volunteer, and a lover of Star Trek. As a child, she looked at the stars and didn't ask if she could go, only when. In 1992, aboard the shuttle Endeavour, she orbited the Earth 127 times. She carried a photo of Bessie Coleman, the first black female pilot, with her, a quiet tribute to women who had soared before her, even without rockets. But May's innovation didn't end in orbit. She later founded technology companies, explored space analog environments on Earth, and advocated for science education in underserved communities. Her philosophy, that art and science are not opposites, they're complementary. She called herself a scientist who dances or a dancer who scienced. Tonight, imagine her floating in zero gravity, a poem of motion among stars. Isn't it soft and thrilling to realize that sometimes the future is reached by those who dare to daydream in two directions? You are now beside a Victorian gas lamp, flickering through London fog. Lean closer, and you'll find Hertha Ayrton, pencil in hand, notebook open, sketching sparks. Hertha was a physicist, engineer, and suffragist who studied the behavior of electric arcs, those dazzling, buzzing discharges of current. Her research improved the performance of electric street lighting across Europe. But despite her brilliance, the Royal Society denied her membership. Why? Because she was a woman. Still, Hertha presented her findings to male-dominated science halls. She invented tools to clear sand from trenches in World War I. She built devices, taught students, and mentored other women in science long before it was fashionable to do so. Imagine her adjusting copper coils, her mind humming like the arc itself, steady, luminous, and just a little dangerous. Hertha once said, "An error that ascribes to a man what was actually the work of a woman has more lives than a cat." As you drift off, let that wisdom spark quietly in the dark. Hey friends, let's cross a bridge, not just any bridge, but one woven with cables and hope, the Brooklyn Bridge. In the late 1800s, when her husband Washington Roebling fell ill during construction, Emily Roebling stepped in. She studied engineering in secret. She learned materials science, stress dynamics, and suspension geometry. And then, she managed the most ambitious bridge project in the world. Emily oversaw workers, communicated with architects, and defended her husband's and her own designs to city officials. For over a decade, she was the silent architect of one of America's most iconic structures. When the bridge opened, she was the first person to cross it, carrying a rooster in her lap as a symbol of triumph. As you rest, imagine her walking steadily across the planks, wind tugging at her hat, eyes lifted toward steel towers she helped raise. Isn't it beautiful how sometimes the best builders are the ones no one expected to lead? You're now inside a lab in 1940s St. Louis. Bunsen burners hiss and vials clink gently together. At a corner bench stands Gertie Corey, deep in thought. Gertie was the first woman to win the Nobel Prize in physiology or medicine in the United States. She discovered how the body processes glucose, how energy cycles through muscle and returns to the liver. Her Corey cycle remains central to our understanding of metabolism, but she faced rejection after rejection. Universities didn't want to hire both her and her husband, Carl Corey. So for years, she worked in assistant roles, until her genius could no longer be ignored. Together they unlocked life's energy dance, sugar to muscle, muscle to sugar, a quiet loop of motion and renewal. Gertie never sought applause, she sought answers. Tonight, picture her watching a blood sample spin in a centrifuge, imagining how cells breathe, feed, and move. Isn't it peaceful to think that within your very breath, her work still flows? Dear listener, drift now to a silent observatory in early 20th century Massachusetts. Stars blink overhead like tiny Morse code signals. Inside, Henrietta Swan Leavitt, deaf from an illness, sorted photographic plates by lamplight. She wasn't allowed to use telescopes. Instead, she was hired as a computer at Harvard, paid to analyze stars. And then she noticed something. Certain stars, Cepheid variables, pulsed in a rhythmic pattern. She realized the rate of brightness change was connected to distance. Her discovery became a cosmic ruler. With it, Edwin Hubble measured the universe and proved it was expanding. But Henrietta's name rarely accompanied the breakthrough. Still, every time astronomers peer deeper into space, they rely on her elegant math. As you settle tonight, imagine her fingers tracing star charts like sheet music, and hearing, in her own way, the silent harmony of galaxies. Isn't it comforting that even in quiet, distant light, someone can leave a timeless note? You are now entering a small doctor's office in the early 1900s. Leather chairs creak. A glass syringe catches the light. Letitia Gear was a nurse and inventor who changed medicine with a simple improvement: the one-handed syringe. Before her design, syringes required two hands, clumsy and awkward in emergencies. Letitia's 1899 model allowed doctors and nurses to hold, fill, and inject with one hand. It may sound small, but it transformed care. Quicker vaccines, cleaner technique, easier use. She patented it herself and began producing it for wide distribution. Picture her holding that slender cylinder, not as a weapon, but as a tool of mercy. Every injection you've ever received with a modern syringe, it traces back to Letitia's quiet insight. Isn't it lovely how healing can begin with a gentler grip? Hey friends, imagine a rainy morning in early 1900s New York. Streetcars rattle past, and drivers squint through windshields blurred with raindrops. Mary Anderson noticed this and invented the windshield wiper. She designed a lever-operated blade that wiped away rain without needing to stop the vehicle. People thought it was unnecessary, even laughed, but she patented it anyway in 1903. Her design went unused for years, until the rise of automobiles made it indispensable. Today, it's in every car, from sedans to rockets. Mary never made a fortune, but she made driving safer, clearer, and a little less stormy. As you rest tonight, imagine her watching rain dance down glass and thinking, there must be a better way. Isn't it gentle genius to see the road ahead more clearly? You are now seated at a quiet kitchen table where a game board lies open, dice beside it. But this isn't Monopoly, not yet. Elizabeth Magie created the Landlord's Game in 1904 to teach people about income inequality. The game had two versions, one where everyone prospered and one where monopolies took over. It was meant as a lesson, a mirror. Years later, Charles Darrow copied her concept, sold it as Monopoly, and made millions. Elizabeth received only $500. Still, her message lingers, hidden inside every property trade and plastic hotel. Imagine her watching friends play, laughter masking a quiet parable beneath the rules. Isn't it strange how even games can be tools of thought? Dear listener, settle under your blanket as the winter wind howls gently outside. In 1919, Alice Parker patented a central heating system powered by natural gas. Before that, homes relied on wood or coal, inefficient and uneven. Her system used individually controlled air ducts, the precursor to modern HVAC. She imagined comfort not as a luxury, but as a necessity. A black woman in early 20th century America, Alice's work received little recognition, but her vision warms homes to this day. Picture her blueprint spread on a table, her pencil sketching warmth for strangers she'd never meet. Isn't it cozy to think of warmth as someone's legacy? Hey friends, if you love this series, don't forget to subscribe. It helps us keep uncovering these gentle sparks of history. Now drift into a Chicago beauty salon in the 1920s. Hot combs sizzle. The scent of hair oil drifts through the air. Marjorie Joyner was a cosmetologist and educator who invented the permanent wave machine, a device that curled hair using controlled heat. She was the first black woman to receive a patent in the U.S. She also developed educational programs for thousands of stylists, especially women of color. Her invention brought style and self-confidence to many during a time when beauty was tightly regulated by race and class. Tonight, imagine her adjusting wires gently along curls, like tuning the strings of a harp. Isn't it beautiful how style can become both science and empowerment? Hey friends, imagine watching fireworks from a dockside, and then realizing they're not for celebration, but communication. In the 1800s, Martha Costin was left widowed with 4 children. Her husband had begun a design for maritime signal flares, but never completed it. So Martha, with no formal scientific training, picked up his scattered notes and got to work. She tested chemicals, consulted chemists. She experimented for nearly a decade. The result? The Coston signal flare, a color-coded flare system used by the U.S. Navy to communicate at sea. Her invention saved countless lives during naval operations and helped standardize nighttime maritime communication across the world. Though often credited to others, it was Martha who patented the design. It was Martha who burned her hands in the testing. It was Martha who lit the sky so ships could speak. Picture her standing on a shoreline watching colored fire climb into darkness. Isn't it luminous to think one mother's grief could guide a fleet home? You are now standing beside the great river Avon in 19th century England. Bridges span the water, and beneath them, hidden threads of design. Sarah Guppy, born in 1770, was the first woman to patent a bridge design. Her blueprints contributed to the suspension bridge movement in Britain, especially the one in Clifton, famously attributed to Brunel. She also invented a tea urn that cooked eggs, a bed for exercise, a device to prevent barnacles on ships. Her ideas flowed in every direction. She gave many of them freely to the government. Despite her impact, her name rarely appeared. Men presented her designs, history polished them smooth. Imagine her with blue ink on her fingers, tying threads between mechanics, architecture, and daily life. Sarah once said, "It is important to me that my sex should not be left behind." As you drift off, let that thought stay with you. Quiet persistence shaping great arches in stone and sky. Hey friends, you are now in a modern laboratory, where tiny lights blink beside long glass tubes. It smells faintly of antiseptic and hope. Anne Tsukamoto is a stem cell researcher who co-patented the process to isolate human blood stem cells in the 1990s. This process opened doors to bone marrow transplants, cancer treatment, and regenerative medicine. Her work made it possible to replenish immune systems after chemotherapy and helped pave the way for cutting-edge therapies today. Stem cells are small, nearly invisible, but they hold incredible power to heal, to grow, to begin again. Anne's hands, steady over microscopes, brought that possibility closer. She continues her work quietly, rarely in headlines. As you rest, picture a single stem cell glowing softly like a lantern, and imagine what it might become. Isn't it peaceful to know that within you, the potential for healing has already been mapped? Dear listener, take a deep breath and dive under the Mediterranean waves, salt swirling, sea fans swaying. Jean Villepreux Power was a 19th century French naturalist who asked, "How can we study marine life without taking it from the sea?" So she invented the aquarium. She built glass enclosures to house aquatic creatures safely, recreating their environment so they could be observed and understood. Before her, marine science meant preserving fish in jars. She changed that, especially with her study of the paper nautilus, proving that it did, in fact, make its own shell. Her work helped launch marine biology as a field, yet over time, her contributions were forgotten, even as aquariums became common around the world. Imagine her sketching sea creatures by candlelight, waves crashing softly outside her window. Isn't it lovely to think curiosity can be enclosed in glass and still breathe? You're now standing in a delivery room in the 1950s. The air is tense. And then, a newborn's cry. Dr. Virginia Apgar was an obstetric anesthesiologist who created a simple scoring system to quickly assess the health of newborns called the Apgar score. It rates breathing, heart rate, reflexes, muscle tone, and color. Within a minute, doctors know whether the baby needs urgent care. Before this, infant mortality was far more common. Her system helped save countless lives. Virginia also played the cello, flew planes, and had a wry sense of humor. She once said, "Nobody, but nobody, is going to stop breathing on me." Imagine her glancing at a watch, listening closely, making notes that would echo across maternity wards forever. Isn't it reassuring to know one woman's clarity could make life's very first moments safer? Hey friends, Let's walk through the soot and steam of 19th century New York. Elevated trains clatter overhead. Noise, constant and unbearable, fills the streets. Mary Walton, a quiet inventor living above those tracks, decided enough was enough. She designed a system to reduce the sound and pollution of those trains, using sandboxes and wooden boxes to absorb vibration. Her design worked so well, the New York City Metropolitan Railroad adopted it across the city. She also patented a system for reducing smokestack emissions, long before clean air became a slogan. Mary wasn't famous, but her invention softened a noisy world. Imagine her in her apartment listening, and then sketching silence. Isn't it calming to remember that even noise can be soothed by someone listening closely? Dear listener, picture a quiet clinic in rural Australia in the 1930s. A woman rolls warm towels over a child's legs, humming softly. Sister Elizabeth Kenny developed a revolutionary treatment for polio, using heat and movement rather than immobilization. At a time when casts and braces were standard, she believed in stimulating muscles, encouraging motion, restoring confidence. Her methods faced skepticism. She wasn't a doctor, but her patients thrived, and slowly, the medical world began to listen. Today's physical therapy owes much to her approach. Picture her kneeling beside a child, holding their hand as they take one more step. Isn't it tender how healing can begin with trust, warmth, and the courage to challenge the norm? Hey friends, open your refrigerator door. Feel that rush of cool air? You might owe that freshness to Florence Parpart. In 1914, Florence patented an electric refrigerator. At the time, ice boxes were the norm, requiring regular ice deliveries and prone to leaks and spoilage. Her design, compact and efficient, helped modernize kitchens. She also invented street cleaning machines. But it was the refrigerator that quietly transformed how people stored food, preserved health, and saved time. Though little is known about her life, her invention became a kitchen staple. Imagine her blueprint humming quietly behind every meal prepped and every midnight snack. Isn't it soothing to think innovation sometimes waits inside the hum of everyday comfort? You are now beneath a rocket, engines silent for now. The countdown has not yet begun. Mary Sherman Morgan was a self-taught chemist who developed Hydene, the rocket fuel that launched America's first satellite into space. She worked in secrecy during the Cold War. Few knew that a woman, working quietly in a lab in heels and a lab coat, held the key to ignition. Her formula gave Explorer 1 the thrust it needed in 1958. She received no awards, no public credit in her lifetime. Her story surfaced later through her son's investigation. Imagine her watching a rocket ascend, hands clasped, knowing the lift was hers. Isn't it incredible how sometimes the spark behind history is utterly invisible? Hey friends, if you're still with us under the soft cover of night, here's one more marvel before we pause. Stephanie Kwolek was a chemist at DuPont when she discovered a lightweight, incredibly strong polymer, Kevlar. It's 5 times stronger than steel by weight. It's used in bulletproof vests, helmets, spacecraft, and countless industrial applications. She was experimenting with polymers for tires, but what she created instead would go on to save thousands of lives. Stephanie's invention was so surprising, even her lab doubted it at first. But she insisted, she pushed, and she proved it. As you rest, imagine her swirling golden liquid into fibers that would become armor, protection woven from calm precision. Isn't it beautiful that the strongest shield came from one woman's gentle persistence? Hey friends, let your thoughts drift now into a desert landscape, cables stretching far across the dust, humming quietly in the sun. Edith Clark was the first professionally employed female electrical engineer in the U.S. and the first female professor of electrical engineering at the University of Texas. In the 1920s, she developed a tool called the Clark Calculator, a graphical device that helped solve long, complex equations used in electrical power transmission. It made it easier to calculate how electricity would behave over vast distances. Her work helped light rural areas, improve power grids, and lay the groundwork for modern electrical infrastructure. Though she often faced rejection due to her gender, she persisted, working her way from a human computer to a visionary engineer. Imagine her drawing invisible lines across the sky, translating numbers into power and power into light. Isn't it peaceful to know that the glow from your lamp may trace back to her calculations? You are now in a quiet village in 1940s Spain. The classroom smells faintly of chalk and pine. Children lean over wooden desks, and one teacher, Ángela Ruiz Robles, is building the future. She wasn't just a teacher. She was an inventor. Concerned about the heavy weight of school books, Ángela created the world's first mechanical encyclopedia, an early prototype of the modern e-reader. It had interchangeable cartridges, a magnifying glass, and even a light for reading in the dark. Though it never went into full production, her idea arrived decades before digital tablets. She envisioned interactive, portable, accessible learning long before screens were glowing in every backpack. She once said, "My greatest wish is to give the children of today a brighter tomorrow." Imagine her polishing the copper casing of her device while her students giggle nearby. Isn't it lovely when technology begins with kindness? Hey friends, tilt your gaze toward the night sky. Can you see the stars blinking? Each one holds a secret signature, and Annie Jump Cannon could read them like music. She was an astronomer at Harvard in the late 1800s. Deaf since childhood, Annie developed a system to classify stars by their spectra, the light they emitted. Her OBAF-GKM sequence is still used today. Over her career, she cataloged more than 350,000 stars. Imagine the patience, the quiet, the intimacy of sorting starlight by hand. Though women in her era were often called computers, Annie became the first female officer of the American Astronomical Society. She once said, "Classifying the stars has helped me to find my own place among them." As you rest beneath your blanket tonight, just know, somewhere above, a star flickers in her order. And isn't it soothing how silence can still echo through the galaxies? You are now inside a softly humming laboratory in 1930s New York. Light streams through the window and doesn't reflect back. The glass looks invisible. Catherine Burr Blodgett invented non-reflective glass. She was the first woman to earn a PhD in physics from Cambridge and later worked at General Electric. Her glass coating, made of monomolecular films layered with precision, allowed light to pass without glare. It transformed photography, cinema, telescopes, and even eyeglasses. Before her invention, images were dulled by reflection. Thanks to Catherine, we see the world more clearly, through windshields, camera lenses, and display screens. Imagine her watching the sun shine through a pane of perfect transparency. No sparkle, no blur, just vision. Isn't it magical that sometimes brilliance is what you don't see? Dear listener, take a quiet breath and step into the warm breeze of colonial South Carolina. The fields sway with possibility, and at just 16 years old, Eliza Lucas is running 3 plantations. She introduced indigo as a commercial crop to the American South, after tireless experimentation with strains, soil, and fermentation. Her process created a brilliant blue dye that would become one of the colony's most valuable exports. All before her 18th birthday, she corresponded with statesmen, managed estates, and raised a family, while still logging agricultural notes with clarity and vision. George Washington was a pallbearer at her funeral. Imagine her staining silk threads with the deepest shade of blue, a color once exotic, made domestic. Isn't it soothing how sometimes transformation blooms from a teenage girl's curiosity? Hey friends, let's open a book filled with equations, not just scribbles, but graceful poetic curves across the page. Grace Chisholm Young was a British mathematician in the early 20th century who helped develop the foundations of modern calculus, particularly in the field of functions and derivatives. She wrote under her husband's name for many years, but the clarity of her proofs and originality of thought quietly stood out. Together, they published major mathematical works, but her solo contributions, particularly in rigorous function theory, showed astonishing depth. She once described mathematics as music and logic. Picture her writing by a window, the candle flickering, her mind dancing with abstract patterns. Isn't it comforting to think some symphonies are made not of notes, but of numbers? You are now back in a 19th century Massachusetts paper mill. Wood chips crunch beneath your shoes. And near a humming machine, a teenage girl watches. Margaret Knight invented the machine that folds flat-bottomed paper bags. It may sound simple, but it changed packaging, shopping, and industry. Before her, bags were just envelopes, flimsy and awkward. She built the prototype herself, fought off a man who tried to steal the idea, and earned dozens of patents. She also made shoe-cutting machines, rotary engines, and window frames. Nicknamed the female Edison, Margaret never stopped creating. As you rest tonight, picture her turning gears slowly, coaxing order from clatter. Isn't it lovely when everyday brilliance folds neatly into our hands? Dear listener, we are now aboard a space shuttle. Cabin lights dim, Earth a blue swirl below. Ellen Ochoa became the first Latina woman in space in 1993, but before her mission, she worked as an inventor, developing optical systems for automated space exploration. She holds patents in image processing and systems to guide spacecraft using light. Her innovations helped robots see in space. Later, she became the director of NASA's Johnson Space Center. Imagine her peering through lenses, coding light into logic. A scientist, engineer, and flutist. Yes, she brought music to orbit too. Isn't it soft and strong at once? How she turned vision into trajectory? Hey friends, dim the lights and settle into a gentle rhythm, like the slow sway of cattle across open fields. Temple Grandin, born with autism, revolutionized the livestock industry, not with machines, but with empathy. She designed humane handling systems based on animal behavior, using curved paths and quiet movements to reduce stress. Her insights came from her unique sensory world. What others missed, she noticed. What others ignored, she respected. She once said, "Nature is cruel, but we don't have to be." Her inventions aren't just metal and angles. They're compassion, made visible. Picture her walking a corral at dawn, clipboard in hand, animals at ease. Isn't it beautiful how innovation can begin with feeling what others feel? Dear listener, if your milk is cold and safe to drink, thank Mary Engel Pennington. She was a chemist and refrigeration pioneer in the early 20th century, developing safe food storage techniques for meat, milk, and eggs. At a time when foodborne illness was rampant, Mary's work saved countless lives. She worked with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, inspecting rail cars, designing sanitary ice boxes, and writing safety standards that endure today. She even developed the first refrigerated train cars. Imagine her inspecting a storage room, clipboard tucked under one arm, thinking, how do we preserve not just food, but trust? Isn't it comforting to know that safety too can be invented? Hey friends, step into a cozy house in Oregon in the 1980s, a home that hums, clicks, and washes itself. Frances Gabe was tired of housework, so she invented something remarkable, the world's first self-cleaning house. She built a prototype complete with sprinklers in ceilings, air jets in walls, and drains in the floor. Dishes, floors, even closets. Everything was designed to clean with a button press. She held over 60 patents, from self-drying walls to automated soap dispensers. Though her house never became mass-produced, it worked, and she lived in it for decades. Neighbors thought she was eccentric, but she was solving a problem with elegance and a little rebellion. Frances once said, "Housework is a thankless, unending job. Why not let the house do it?" Imagine her sipping tea while her walls sparkle around her. Isn't it delightful to think of a home as both shelter and helper? You are now beneath glittering chandeliers of 1940s Hollywood. The cameras flash, the orchestra plays. But behind the glamorous smile sits an inventor. Hedy Lamarr, once called the most beautiful woman in the world, co-invented frequency hopping, a technique to prevent torpedo signals from being jammed during World War II. Her work with composer George Antheil laid the groundwork for modern wireless technology: Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, GPS. She wasn't trained as a scientist, she was curious, always sketching, tinkering, solving. At the time, no one took her seriously. It wasn't until decades later that her contribution was acknowledged. Imagine her on a movie set, quietly mulling over waveforms between takes. Isn't it dazzling how brilliance sometimes wears mascara? Hey friends, let your fingers close around a flashlight. Now imagine it glowing, powered by nothing but the warmth of your hand. Anne Makasinski was just 15 when she invented the hollow flashlight, a device powered entirely by body heat, using thermoelectric tiles. She was inspired after learning that a friend in the Philippines couldn't study at night due to lack of electricity. Her design earned global awards and opened conversations about sustainable, human-powered energy. Still in her teens, she later invented a mug that charges phones from the heat of tea. Imagine her scribbling notes on a napkin, energy glowing in every idea. Isn't it heartening when young minds bring light? Quite literally. You are now among cornfields in late 19th century Nebraska. The wind rustles tall stalks, and in a small chemistry lab, Rachel Lloyd is stirring possibilities. She was the first American woman to earn a PhD in chemistry and the first to be accepted into the American Chemical Society. Her research revolutionized the U.S. sugar industry. She developed ways to extract sugar from sugar beets, a more sustainable crop than cane. Her work helped make the U.S. self-sufficient in sugar production. She was also a teacher, mentor, and fierce advocate for women in science. Picture her dipping a beaker into syrupy extract, watching crystals form. Isn't it sweet when science grows from roots? Hey friends, imagine an early telephone switchboard, buzzing, clacking, and constantly failing when overwhelmed. Dr. Erna Hoover changed that. In the 1950s, she invented a computerized telephone switching system that prioritized incoming calls based on volume and traffic, much like how modern software handles overload. She received one of the first software patents ever awarded. Her system kept lines open during crises and laid groundwork for modern call routing. She coded her breakthrough while recovering from childbirth, a detail rarely included in textbooks. Imagine her sketching logic diagrams beside a cradle, thinking through the rhythm of communication. Isn't it quiet brilliance to manage chaos with calm design? Dear listener, step into a conference hall in the 1980s. Chalkboards behind the podium, minds humming in equations. Dr. Shirley Ann Jackson, a theoretical physicist, was the first black woman to earn a doctorate from MIT. Her research in telecommunications contributed to caller ID, call waiting, and fiber optic cables. Later, she led the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission and became president of Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. She didn't invent one device, but helped shape the foundation on which many technologies operate. Her mind moved like electricity, unseen, powerful, connective. Picture her adjusting her glasses before a whiteboard, solving a puzzle others couldn't see. Isn't it grounding to know that communication itself was shaped by quiet brilliance? Hey friends, settle into a rhythm of gears and dreams. Nora Mae Cadena grew up in East Los Angeles. By 28, she held 3 MIT degrees, engineering, manufacturing, and an MBA. She co-founded a venture fund that invests in deep tech innovations, hardware, biotech, space. But what makes her remarkable is how she mentors Latinas and underrepresented students in STEM. Her workshops empower youth to build robots, launch businesses, dream wider. She's not just building machines, she's building bridges. Imagine her walking through a lab, pointing out parts, encouraging a child with a soldering iron. Isn't it beautiful when leadership sounds like, "You can build this too"? You are now holding your phone. You tap call. A few moments later, someone answers on the other side of the world. Dr. Marion Croak helped make that connection possible. She pioneered voice over IP, VoIP technology, turning voice into data, enabling internet calls, video conferencing, and streaming. She holds over 200 patents, including the tech that supports online voting and disaster response networks. Her curiosity bloomed from watching tech fail during Hurricane Katrina. She wanted better, faster, more humane systems. Now a VP at Google, she continues shaping global communication. Imagine her tracking data packets across a screen like starlight. Isn't it soothing to know that even your voice travels on the wings of someone's insight? Hey friends, dim the lights and open your laptop. Now imagine the screen seeing you, but not recognizing your face. Joy Buolamwini is a computer scientist and poet of code who uncovered racial bias in facial recognition software. Her research at MIT revealed that many algorithms failed to identify darker-skinned faces accurately. She founded the Algorithmic Justice League to fight bias in artificial intelligence. Her TED Talk, How I'm Fighting Bias in Algorithms, sparked global conversation and policy change. She calls herself a poet of code, someone who brings ethics into the digital mirror. Picture her testing facial scans in low light, asking gently, "Who gets seen?" Isn't it hopeful to know that fairness too can be engineered? Dear listener, if you've loved this soft unveiling of history so far, don't forget to subscribe. There are 40 more stories ahead, each one tucked in time, waiting. Now meet the woman who named the pattern behind many of these stories. Margaret Rossiter is a historian of science who coined the term the Matilda effect, describing how women's achievements are often credited to men. Her work uncovered the hidden labor behind Nobel Prizes, inventions, discoveries. She sifted archives, found missing names, and reconnected legacies. Without her, many of the women you've just met might have stayed footnotes. Imagine her in a library piecing together lost threads, one card catalog at a time. Isn't it profound when the act of remembering becomes a form of innovation too? Hey friends, dim the lights and picture a kitchen from the 1920s. The scent of fresh bread lingers, and a woman moves gracefully, studying every motion. Lillian Gilbreth was a psychologist and engineer who transformed domestic life through efficiency. She applied time-motion studies, previously used in factories, to kitchens, designing layouts and appliances that made life smoother for women. She introduced the work triangle used in modern kitchens. She invented the foot-pedal trash can. She helped design refrigerator shelves based on reach and visibility. But her impact wasn't just domestic. She consulted for major corporations and became the first female member of the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. She was also the mother of 12 children. Imagine her drawing floor plans beside a bubbling stew, noting the distance between sink and stove, chore and comfort. Isn't it calming to think that care too can be engineered? You are now under a velvet night sky in 18th century England. A telescope leans against a stone balcony, and behind it stands Caroline Herschel, peering into galaxies. She was the first woman to discover a comet, and not just one, but 8. Born in Hanover and trained as a singer, she joined her brother William Herschel in astronomical study. While he became famous for discovering Uranus, Caroline cataloged thousands of stars, corrected astronomical tables, and worked as Britain's first paid female scientist. She received a gold medal from the Royal Astronomical Society, a rarity for her time. Imagine her breath fogging the eyepiece, her gloved hand steady against the sky's slow rotation. Isn't it lovely to think that even stars remember the one who named them? Hey friends, you are now inside a 20th century chemical lab. Bottles line the walls, and crystalline powders shimmer under fluorescent light. Edith Flanagan was a chemist who developed over 200 synthetic materials, including zeolites, tiny crystal structures that purify and transform molecules. Her most famous invention? Zeolite Y, used in petroleum refining. It made gasoline production more efficient and cleaner, revolutionizing energy science. She also worked on materials used in water purification, pollution control, and cancer treatment. One of her habits? Wearing pearls under her lab coat, precision outside, elegance inside. Picture her adjusting a microscope as light dances through clear lattices, invisible to the naked eye but shaping industries. Isn't it wondrous how some of the strongest structures begin in silence? Dear listener, take a slow breath and feel the sun warm your skin, because Maria Telkes believed sunlight could power the future. Born in Hungary, she became a pioneer of solar energy. In the 1940s, she created one of the first solar-heated homes in Massachusetts using salt-based thermal storage. Later, she invented a solar-powered desalination device to provide drinking water in remote areas, used by soldiers and desert dwellers alike. She held over 20 patents and was dubbed the Sun Queen. Imagine her sketching solar collectors under a skylight, thinking, "Light is not just warmth, it's a promise." Isn't it beautiful when innovation is guided by the sky? Hey friends, let's go to a dairy farm in early 1900s Pennsylvania. The air smells of hay, and a microscope sits beside a milk churn. Alice Catherine Evans, a bacteriologist, discovered that raw milk could carry dangerous bacteria, specifically the organism that caused undulant fever. Her findings led to the mandatory pasteurization of milk across the United States. At first, she faced disbelief. Many dismissed her. She didn't have a PhD, and she was a woman. But she stood firm, citing data and patient outcomes. Years later, the medical community adopted her recommendations and changed public health forever. Picture her swirling a petri dish, tracing the slow patterns of life. Isn't it gentle genius to protect millions through something as simple as heat? You are now seated before a glowing screen. And behind that screen, decades ago, stood Valerie Thomas, a NASA scientist and visionary. In the 1970s, Valerie developed the technology behind 3D imaging using concave mirrors. Her invention is used in medical imaging, movie production, and satellite projections. She also helped launch Landsat, the first satellite to send digital images of Earth's surface. As one of the few black women in NASA's science division, she mentored young engineers and advocated for women in STEM. Imagine her aligning mirrors in a dark lab, adjusting focus not just in optics, but in opportunity. Isn't it stunning how reflections can become portals? Hey friends, feel the cool sweetness of summer, the kind that melts slowly on your tongue. You have Nancy Johnson to thank. In 1843, she patented the first hand-cranked ice cream freezer. Before that, ice cream was labor-intensive and expensive, reserved for the elite. Her design used a central paddle and salt-based cooling system to churn ice cream evenly, making it accessible and easier to prepare. She never made a fortune, but her invention became the foundation for a beloved tradition. Imagine her watching the smooth swirl of cream turn to velvet, smiling at the simplicity of delight. Isn't it tender when joy is engineered, one scoop at a time? You are now at a secretary's desk in 1950s Texas. The typewriter clacks. A mistake. Again. But Bette Nesmith Graham has a brush and a plan. She invented liquid paper. Using tempera paint and a fine brush, she created a correction fluid that allowed typists to fix errors without retyping the whole page. It became a global office staple. She later founded a company, hired women, and used her earnings to fund women's education and the arts. Also, her son was Mike Nesmith of the Monkees. Picture her shaking a tiny bottle, swirling confidence into every stroke. Isn't it graceful how a single drop can change the story? Dear listener, you're now in a quiet physics lab in mid-century America. Chalk dust hangs in the air. Equations bloom on the blackboard. Chien-Shiung Wu, a Chinese-American physicist, conducted the famous Wu experiment in 1956, disproving the law of parity in nuclear physics. Her results shook the foundation of quantum mechanics. It won a Nobel, though awarded to her male colleagues. She also worked on the Manhattan Project and developed improved radiation detection methods. Despite the oversight, her peers knew the truth. They called her the First Lady of Physics. Picture her aligning radioactive particles with infinite care, unveiling asymmetry in nature's laws. Isn't it extraordinary when balance is broken and knowledge expands? Hey friends, if you're still wrapped up with us in this journey, you're in good company. Now, imagine a New Jersey winter in 1919, icy wind curling under doors. Inside, a woman is sketching blueprints for something radical. Alice H. Parker, a black inventor, designed a central heating system using natural gas. Her design included thermostats and zoned heating, ideas well ahead of their time. Before her, most homes relied on fireplaces or coal. Her system promised efficiency, safety, and comfort. Though it was never fully realized in her lifetime, it laid groundwork for today's home heating innovations. Picture her warming her hands over blueprints rather than flames. Isn't it gentle magic to turn warmth into design? Hey friends, imagine yourself in an eye clinic in 1980s Los Angeles. The overhead lights are soft. The instruments gleam. And at the center stands Dr. Patricia Bath, holding a laser. She was the first African-American woman to receive a medical patent. Her invention? The laser phaco probe, a device that made cataract surgery faster, safer, and more precise. She also co-founded the American Institute for the Prevention of Blindness, believing that sight is a basic human right. Patricia's innovations restored vision to those who had been blind for decades. She was also the first black female doctor to receive a residency in ophthalmology at NYU, and the first woman on staff at UCLA's Jules Stein Eye Institute. Imagine her adjusting the beam of focused light, thinking not of brilliance, but of clarity. Isn't it beautiful how vision can be gifted twice? You might be picturing rabbits in waistcoats, and you wouldn't be wrong. But Beatrix Potter was more than a beloved children's author. She was also a mycologist, a scientist who studied fungi. In the late 1800s, she made detailed illustrations and conducted experiments on mushroom spores, theorizing their reproductive process. Her paper on spore germination was submitted to the Linnean Society under a man's name, as women weren't allowed to present. Her botanical work wasn't accepted in her time, but today her drawings are praised for both their beauty and accuracy. She later used profits from her books to conserve nature, purchasing farmland to preserve the English countryside. Picture her walking through dewy fields, sketchbook in one hand, curiosity in the other. Isn't it lovely how wonder can live in both mushrooms and stories? You are now in a dark room filled with quiet chemicals and photographic prints. But Barbara Askins didn't need new film. She made old film better. As a chemist at NASA in the 1970s, she developed a method to enhance underexposed or damaged photographs, crucial for satellite and space imagery. Her invention used radioactive materials to restore faint images, making it possible to recover crucial data from low-light photos. The technique soon spread to medicine, archaeology, and law enforcement. Barbara became the National Inventor of the Year in 1978, one of the first women to receive the honor. Imagine her lifting an image from a tray, watching hidden shapes bloom like secrets in fog. Isn't it gentle genius to rescue light from the shadows? Hey friends, let your thoughts drift to the stars. Yvonne Brill was a rocket scientist who invented a propulsion system used to keep communications satellites in geosynchronous orbit. Her creation, the electrothermal hydrazine thruster, was smaller, cheaper, and more reliable than earlier systems. It became a standard in satellite navigation. Despite having no formal support early in her career, she persisted. In job interviews, she was once told, "Women don't work in propulsion." But she did. And thanks to her, your GPS, satellite calls, and weather forecasts may have flown straighter paths. Imagine her checking calculations by hand, sipping coffee, plotting orbits no one else dared imagine. Isn't it peaceful to think that stability in space came from quiet determination? Dear listener, let's step into a hospital ward in 1940s America. The air is still, the patient small and silent. Dr. Hattie Alexander was a pediatrician and microbiologist who developed a treatment for bacterial meningitis in children, a condition once almost always fatal. She reduced the mortality rate from nearly 100% to less than 20%. Later, she was one of the first scientists to identify antibiotic resistance, noting that bacteria could evolve to defeat drugs. She was elected president of the American Pediatric Society, the first woman to hold the title. Imagine her reviewing cultures under a microscope, eyes soft with care and clarity. Isn't it quiet power? To heal with knowledge and gentleness? Hey friends, feel the weave of fabric between your fingers. Light, strong, almost invisible. That's Kevlar, and you have Stephanie Kwolek to thank. In the 1960s, while researching polymers for DuPont, She discovered a lightweight, heat-resistant fiber 5 times stronger than steel. It would become the basis for bulletproof vests, helmets, spacecraft armor, and more. Her invention has saved thousands of lives. Yet Stephanie remained humble, driven by curiosity, not acclaim. She loved chemistry because, as she once said, it combined beauty and structure. Imagine her watching golden threads spin out of solution, quietly altering the boundaries between strength and softness. Isn't it remarkable how protection can feel like a whisper? You are now deep in a forest in China, centuries of plant wisdom tucked beneath the leaves. Tu Youyou, a pharmaceutical chemist, searched ancient texts and folk remedies for a cure to malaria. She discovered artemisinin, a compound from sweet wormwood, and refined it into a modern treatment, still used today. Her work has saved millions. She had no medical degree or PhD, but in 2015 she became the first Chinese woman to win a Nobel Prize in medicine. She called her research a gift from traditional Chinese medicine to the world. Imagine her boiling herbs gently, watching the steam carry away disease. Isn't it calming to think healing can rise from roots? Hey friends, we're now in 1840s America. A classroom of medical students turns as one woman enters, Elizabeth Blackwell. She became the first woman to receive a medical degree in the United States. She faced rejection from dozens of schools. Finally, one admitted her as a joke, but she graduated first in her class. She went on to open a medical college for women and train thousands in a time when female physicians were unheard of. She once said, "It is not easy to be a pioneer, but oh, it is fascinating." Imagine her writing late at night, planning the next generation's education, one stethoscope at a time. Isn't it steadying to know that courage can teach? Dear listener, we return once more to the stars. Maria Mitchell, in 1847, discovered a comet using her father's telescope from a rooftop in Nantucket. She became the first American woman to work as a professional astronomer. She later taught at Vassar College, mentoring young women in science and insisting on access to observatories and laboratories. She was an early advocate for equal pay and academic freedom. When asked why she studied the sky, she replied, "We especially need imagination in science. It is not all mathematics, nor all logic, but it is somewhat beauty and poetry." Imagine her adjusting the brass telescope, letting stardust find her eyes. Isn't it soft and stirring to trace infinity with fingertips? Hey friends, if this journey is bringing you peace, don't forget to subscribe. We've still got 20 more women waiting in history's quiet corners. Now picture a battlefield, smoke rising, voices fading, and through it all walks Clara Barton. She was not only the founder of the American Red Cross, but also an innovator in battlefield medicine and emergency response. She developed methods for organizing supplies, transporting aid, and tracing missing soldiers. Her system became a model for disaster relief worldwide. She never called herself a hero, just a helper. Imagine her bandaging wounds by lantern light, handwriting letters to families far away. Isn't it powerful how tenderness can be a system? Hey friends, imagine waves lapping at a seaside stage, salt wind in your hair, applause in the distance. Annette Kellerman, born in the late 1800s, was a professional swimmer, film star, and inventor of the modern one-piece bathing suit for women. At a time when women were expected to swim in dresses, she designed a streamlined suit inspired by functionality and freedom. She was arrested for indecency, but her design changed swimwear forever. Annette also starred in silent films and created underwater ballet. She opened a health food store, published fitness guides, and advocated for women's strength. Picture her diving into the sea, limbs slicing through the water like poetry. Isn't it graceful how innovation sometimes begins with a splash? You are now in a horse-drawn carriage on a chilly Chicago morning in 1893. Breath clouds the air, but beneath your feet, warm air rises. Margaret Wilcox, a mechanical engineer, invented one of the first car heaters. Her idea was simple yet clever. Reroute warm air from the engine into the cabin. No wires, just physics. She patented the system and sparked a movement toward in-vehicle comfort. Though few records remain of her later life, Her design lives in every warm winter drive. Imagine her scribbling diagrams in a notebook while snow gathers on the windowsill. Isn't it heartening that something as small as warmth can travel forward? Dear listener, take a deep breath and picture a bicycle weaving through Manhattan traffic in the 1980s. The basket is filled not with flowers, but with food. Ganga Stone founded God's Love We Deliver, a nonprofit that brought free meals to people living with AIDS when fear and misinformation kept others away. She realized that medicine isn't enough if people are too weak or alone to eat. She helped design hot, nutritious meals tailored to individual needs and brought them personally, again and again. Ganga believed healing began with dignity, with nourishment, with kindness. Picture her pausing at a doorstep, lifting a thermos with quiet compassion. Isn't it tender when innovation is a meal on time? Hey friends, dim the lights. You're in a lab, petri dishes lining every counter. Mold is growing, but it's not a problem. It's a breakthrough. Elizabeth Lee Hazen and Rachel Fuller Brown discovered nystatin, the first antifungal medicine safe for human use. They worked by mail, sending cultures and extracts between their New York and Albany labs in the 1950s. Their drug treated everything from athlete's foot to deadly systemic infections, and the royalties donated entirely to medical research. Imagine the two of them, pipettes in hand, connected not by proximity, but by purpose. Isn't it soothing to know that even quiet teamwork can cure what lingers unseen? You are now holding a globe, but what if the earth didn't sit straight? What if it leaned, wobbled, or tilted slightly? Ellen Fitz, a Canadian schoolteacher in the 1870s, invented an educational globe that showed Earth's axial tilt and revolution in relation to the sun, teaching students about seasons, solstices, and planetary motion. Her design was used in classrooms across North America. She didn't just want students to memorize facts, she wanted them to see the movement of the world. Imagine her rotating a model in candlelight, pointing gently to winter's reach and summer's return. Isn't it gentle genius to spin understanding into a sphere? Hey friends, you're now in the cockpit of an early plane. The wind roars, the gauges flicker, and beside the pilot sits Lucille Hare Carter, part mechanic, part scientist, part sky-bound dreamer. In the 1930s, she designed aviation instruments to improve navigation and communication, working quietly behind military contracts and academic labs. Though her work remained under wraps, her patents improved flight safety for both wartime pilots and commercial aviation. She also advocated for women in engineering, building networks that outlasted her designs. Imagine her tightening bolts with a smile, her heart as steady as the propeller. Isn't it quietly thrilling how flight depends on trust, in both people and pressure? You are now in a bustling factory filled with soft perfume and purpose. Sarah Breedlove, better known as Madam C.J. Walker, was America's first female self-made millionaire. She invented and marketed hair care products specifically for black women in the early 1900s, formulas designed for textured hair, scalp health, and self-expression. She built a company, employed thousands of women, and trained them in both business and independence. Sarah said, "I got my start by giving myself a start." Imagine her writing ingredient lists beside a mirror, bottles lined like a choir of solutions. Isn't it beautiful when innovation is love made practical? Dear listener, let's climb again, this time into the stars through equations and code. Mary G. Ross was the first known Native American female engineer. She worked at Lockheed Martin as part of the Skunk Works, developing spaceflight systems during the dawn of the space race. She designed trajectories for interplanetary missions, satellites, and defense systems, often under top-secret classification. Mary also co-authored technical manuals and championed math education for Native youth. She once said, "Math was easy, it was the people who were hard." Picture her penciling arcs across blueprints like threads from Earth to orbit. Isn't it comforting to know that brilliance can soar from quiet origins? Hey friends, take a moment to smile, because this next invention was made for joy, play, and wagging tails. Nina Ottosson, a Swedish designer and dog lover, invented interactive puzzle toys for pets. After becoming a mother, She wanted to mentally stimulate her dogs without long outdoor adventures. So she designed games that challenged canine instincts, sliding panels, hidden treats, rotating discs. Her puzzles are now used worldwide to support enrichment, reduce anxiety, and bond pets with people. Imagine her watching her dog solve a new toy, tail thumping gently against the floor. Isn't it sweet when innovation comes with a paw print? You are now walking through the elegant halls of the Woman's Building at the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago. Its white facade gleams, and its architect, a woman in her early 20s, Sophia Hayden, the first female graduate of MIT's architecture program, designed the entire building, a space to celebrate women's contributions in art, science, and craft. Despite its success, her vision was compromised by constant revisions and male interference. Afterward, she withdrew from architecture entirely, but her building stood tall for 6 months, filled with voices, stories, and echoes. Imagine her sketching columns by lantern, knowing that structure too can be silent protest. Isn't it tender to think that sometimes beauty is its own argument? Hey friends, picture a classroom where the future and artificial intelligence quietly shake hands. Noriko Arai is a Japanese mathematician and AI researcher who developed the Todai robot project, an artificial intelligence that passed the entrance exam for Tokyo University. But her goal wasn't to build robot students. It was to explore what humans can do that AI can't. Reason creatively, interpret nuance, feel meaning. She used AI to highlight where education was lacking and how we might teach better. Imagine her watching the robot process text, her thoughts drifting toward poetry, ethics, imagination. Isn't it peaceful to know that machines can crunch, but hearts still connect? You're now in a 19th century parlor room filled with teacups, wool shawls, and revolution. Martha C. Wright helped organize the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848, the first women's rights convention in the United States. But beyond activism, she was also an inventor. She created a new form of infant sling that allowed mothers to carry babies more securely while continuing household tasks. Though never widely commercialized, her design was an early precursor to ergonomic baby carriers. Picture her tying fabric with one hand, holding her child in the other, and drafting civil declarations by candlelight. Isn't it tender when care and change rock gently side by side? Hey friends, imagine the daily chaos of cloth diapers and safety pins. Then imagine a mother quietly saying, "There must be a better way." Marion Donovan invented the first waterproof diaper cover using a shower curtain and sewing machine. Later, she created the concept for the disposable diaper, but early investors laughed her out of meetings. Undeterred, she sold the patent herself and paved the way for an entire industry. She went on to invent dental floss dispensers and soap trays, holding over a dozen patents. Imagine her cutting fabric beside a crib, her vision stitched with practicality and patience. Isn't it graceful when invention begins with love? Dear listener, we now return to the curves of Earth. Gladys West, a mathematician in the U.S. Navy, helped develop the mathematical models behind GPS. She analyzed satellite data and corrected for variations in Earth's shape, a task that required immense precision. Her work was classified for years. Only in recent decades was her contribution fully recognized. She once said, "When you're working every day, you're not thinking what impact you're having." Imagine her calibrating calculations that now guide airplanes, maps, even your phone's location. Isn't it humbling to think direction itself can come from behind the scenes? Hey friends, let's end the day in a kitchen filled with spices, jazz, and quiet power. Leah Chase wasn't just a chef, she was an activist, patron of the arts, and inventor of Creole fine dining. Her restaurant, Dookie Chase's in New Orleans, hosted civil rights leaders, presidents, and painters. She redefined what a Southern restaurant could be: elegant, welcoming, powerful. She believed food could change hearts, and tables could become battlegrounds for justice. Imagine her stirring gumbo slowly, stories rising with the steam. Isn't it comforting to know that recipes can carry revolutions? You are now looking through a peephole, But what if you could see the whole hallway, switch the lights, even call for help? In 1966, Marie Van Brittan Brown, a nurse in Queens, invented the first home security system. It included cameras, remote monitors, a microphone, and an emergency call button. Her idea was born from concern, not fear. Long shifts and slow police response times made her want to protect her family. Her invention became the foundation for today's video doorbells and smart security. Picture her adjusting tiny mirrors on her prototype, framing safety through foresight. Isn't it quietly powerful when safety begins with care? Dear listener, imagine a glowing screen, and behind the code, a smile. Rose Dieng Kuntz was one of the first African women admitted to École Polytechnique, France's top engineering school. She became a leader in artificial intelligence and web semantics. Her work allowed computers to understand information, enabling smarter searches, filters, and digital organization. She once said, "The web is not just about data, it's about meaning." She also advocated for STEM education in Africa and inspired girls to follow science with wonder. Picture her guiding lines of logic like ribbons, shaping structure into sense. Isn't it luminous when knowledge becomes connection? You're now aboard a ship rocked gently by waves. The captain leans over the side, peering into the deep, but it's dark. In 1845, Sarah Mather patented the submarine telescope and lamp, a precursor to underwater periscopes. Her invention allowed people to observe beneath the surface, important for ship inspection and salvage work. She was one of the earliest women in America to receive a patent for a scientific instrument. Her device combined a viewing tube with a lamp, creating a window into the unknown. Imagine her testing it on a quiet dock, water slapping softly against the posts. Isn't it calming when insight dips just below the surface? Hey friends, take a walk across a suspension bridge, steel cables arching, concrete holding strong. Now picture the woman who calculated that strength. Elmina Wilson was one of the first female civil engineers in the U.S. She worked on bridges, water systems, and structural design in the early 1900s. She taught at Iowa State and later joined engineering firms designing buildings across the country. At a time when women weren't welcome on construction sites, her numbers built what others would walk across. Imagine her checking steel tension, blueprint unrolled across her desk like a map of possibility. Isn't it grounding to know that structure has silent guardians? Dear listener, let's end with the softest paradox. The woman behind the atom, who refused to split the world. Lise Meitner, an Austrian physicist, co-discovered nuclear fission. But when the Nobel Prize was given to her male colleague Otto Hahn, her name was missing. She never worked on the bomb. She fled the Nazis and spent her days in quiet exile, writing, thinking, teaching. Einstein called her our Marie Curie. She said, "You must not blame science for the use people make of it." Imagine her sitting at a frost-touched window, imagining the energy that sleeps inside every nucleus. Isn't it haunting and healing that even power can be turned down to a whisper? Hey friends, if you've made it here, thank you. Thank you for listening, for wondering, for remembering. If these stories brought you peace, joy, or a spark of inspiration, don't forget to subscribe and share this quiet corner with someone who might need it too. Now close your eyes. These 100 women still echo in bridges, books, satellites, songs, stitches, and starlight. And in the stillness, they're not forgotten anymore.